Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Community Show. This week, we are discussing climate justice, the role of the common person in protecting the environment. And in this week's episode of the Community Show, I am joined by a panel of distinguished ladies and gentlemen who will help us demystify tonight's conversation. And in no particular order, I'm joined by Mr. Jordan Lawoko. Mr. Jordan Lawoko, when the time comes, will elaborately unmute and introduce himself and let you know who exactly he is and what he does. I'm also joined by Mr. George Kiprotich, who is joining us all the way from Kapchorwa. Thank you very much. We're looking forward to having an interesting conversation. When the time comes, I'll request you to unmute and briefly introduce or elaborately introduce yourself so that our viewers can get acquainted with you. Last but not least, the lady on the show, Miss Irene. Wogem Irene, you would also, when the time comes, unmute and introduce yourself. So allow me start with the lady gentleman. With the lady, Miss Irene, kindly unmute and introduce yourself. We can begin the conversation and the other gentlemen will do the same. Thank you. Irene, over to you.
All right, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Twongire Ireen, and I'm a climate change activist, a human rights defender, and I work with an organization called Women for Green Economy Movement Uganda. It's a community-based organization. I'm the founder of the organization, and we basically formed this organization to empower and sensitize vulnerable women on ways how they can really work together to help in climate change, adaptation, and mitigations, since we know that they are the most vulnerable to climate change impacts. And the other thing is we train women with environmental friendly skills to make sure that they start up environmental friendly businesses to help in climate change mitigation and to empower them financially. And all this, we shall see that we are giving them ideas and as citizens to really find out ways or find out their roles in climate change adaptation as our topic speaks out. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Irene. Thank you. And well done with the work you're doing. It's true that when we are categorizing vulnerability, women are the most vulnerable here in Africa, considering their gender roles and responsibilities. But we shall get to the nitty-gritties of that conversation later on. Thank you very much. Mr. Jordan Lawoko, kindly unmute and introduce yourself so that our viewers get to know you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. My name is Jordan Lawoko. I'm a lawyer. I'm also an entrepreneur. My law firm is called Blueprint Advocates. We're located in Ntinda. We basically deal with technology companies, these emerging startups. We provide legal advisory, compliance, and all that. So in the context of this conversation for today, I'm an ordinary man. I don't deal so much with issues of climate change, but I'm also a citizen who is affected by climate change issues. So I'm here today as a panelist, and I'm happy to participate in this conversation, and we understand this topic. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lawoko. We're looking forward to having an engaging and interesting conversation with you. The gentleman, Mr. George Kiprotich. Are you related to Kiprotich, the athlete? Kindly unmute and let us get to know you if you're affiliated with the renowned athlete. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, viewers. My name is Kiprotich George. I am the Executive Director of Kapchorwa Civil Society Organizations Alliance. We operate in the 3 districts of Kapchorwa, Kwela, and Bukwa in Sabay. I am an advocate. I do advocacy and lobby in my institution, where we are looking at reclaiming our sustainability in regard to the climate and conserving the environment. We trying to engage the local mwananchi or the farmers to practice what is we're terming as climate smart agriculture, so that they conserve our soils while they're preserving the environment without really depleting anything. So when we do that, we'll be able to reclaim sustainability in regard to our environment, and then doing it, you'll find that I will be promoting the issues that are current now, where we are supposed to be smart in issues of climate change and that kind of thing. So thank you so much, viewers, and I welcome you for this discussion.
Thank you so much. Definitely, as you have heard it then there from our able panelists, they're all well qualified for tonight's conversation. Allow me to give a quick context to tonight's conversation. We're talking about climate justice, the role of citizens in protecting the environment. Let me give a brief background, a brief overview. We understand that climate change affects poor people hardest, and Africa is a continent that is gravely poor. And that said, Africa being a poor continent, that means we are prone and susceptible to the extreme risks of climate change. A report released by GCA Adaptation highlighted that in the year 2020 and 2021, 52 million Africans in sub-Saharan Africa suffered adverse effects of climate change. That means droughts and floods. That said, the 52 million people in Africa, that constitutes 4% of the continent's population. That means majority of them were from sub-Saharan Africa, of which Uganda is found in sub-Saharan Africa. And then the question of vulnerability comes in. You see, vulnerability in terms of climate change, this refers to conditions that are physical, social, and economic factors that affect the way we can easily adapt to climate change. And earlier on, as categorized or as termed by Irene, she brought it clear that you see women are the most vulnerable. And if we're told to categorize vulnerable groups, we have women, we have vulnerability in terms of age. Now, age means we have the young, the youth, the children, and the old. And then lastly, persons with disabilities. So that said, Uganda is in the situation whereby we experience terrible adverse effects of climate change. And last week, we saw the Africa Climate Summit happening in Kenya, Nairobi, an event that is co-hosted by the government of Kenya and African Union in terms of soliciting climate finance to help Africa adapt to the adverse effects of climate change. That said, allow me to start with the lady, no particular order, for purposes of putting the conversation into context and bringing climate change impact. That's what I want us to focus on. So Irene, as you unmute and turn on your video, kindly tell us what is the extreme impact of climate change in your area in Uganda and to the whole world as a whole, as we talk about the role of citizens in protecting the environment.
All right, thank you very much, Douglas. I think, in my opinion, as citizens of Uganda, most of the people are not aware what climate change is, and at the same time, they don't know what it means. And then when we talk at a global level, you find out that we are using technical words that are very hard for a citizen in my community to understand. So to help my citizen to understand, and the person at a grassroots level, I really want to bring in disintegrate the word climate, what it means, and adaptation, what it means. And in this, maybe putting that word in my local or at a local person understanding. I think climate change means changing of the environment all of a sudden. That's what I think it means. So we can take an example. When I grew up, I used to hear that in the month of April, or the month of June, it's rainy season. But then going back to the month that ended, it was too much sunshine that really affected us as Africans, affected the small farmers. I mean, it was a lot of drought that was happening in my country. And then that is what it means with climate change. Then when we talk about climate change adaptation, these are the measures that we put in place to help to mitigate these climate change effects that really affect us. And we cannot do climate change adaptation minus talking about mitigation. So when I talk about mitigation, we are trying to put in place, or we are trying to avoid the circumstances or the catastrophes of climate change impacts before it happens. For adaptation, climate change impacts have already happened. And then when we talk of mitigation, it means that we have not experienced the climate change catastrophes. So in this, we are trying to put in place measures to make sure that we are not affected, we are not vulnerable to drought, we are not vulnerable to scarcity of water, we are not vulnerable to floods. So that's what I really want to first highlight on what it means. So now going to the topic of today, the role of citizens in climate change adaptation. We all have a role to play. That's why right now the Africa Climate Summit is ongoing in Nairobi. But I have been observing what is really taking place. What is really taking place is that the Africans that are really being affected by climate change catastrophes are not given the platform to speak. You find that on the round table where government leaders, where leaders from global north, where these big people are on the platforms to speak on what Africans are facing. We Africans, we are not given the space to speak on our behalf. Rather, people from global south, these African leaders who really don't know what climate change is, are the ones given all the capacity or the authority to speak on what affects me as an African, to speak on what affects me as vulnerable woman. And I think as citizens, not only in Uganda, but as Africans, we are losing it out because they don't recognize the capacity we have to help in climate change adaptation. And I believe that once given the platform, once given the chance, once given the space to really speak on what climate change is and how we as citizens, we are trying our best. We are using the indigenous knowledge in our community to help in climate change adaptation. We can really create a great space. We can really create a big difference than letting these big people with power, people with authority speak on our behalf. Yeah, over to you. We keep the discussion moving. Over to you, Douglas.
Thank you very much. You speak with a lot of passion, and I can see the activism kicks in when you're making your submission. That has been powerful and it's been interesting. You highlight a number of issues that we face as a continent, as a country, as regards to the climate change effects relating to drought, related floods. And you talk about the issue of lack of representation. I'll get to that issue later on when we're talking about climate justice and equity. But for now, let us first focus on the climate change impact that we are facing. We're all from different parts of the country. So I'd like to hear from Council Jordan Lawoko, then I'll come to Mr. George Kiprotich to give us the impact that the people in Kapchorwa are experiencing, and also give us a nationwide context. But let me get to Council Lawoko. Council Lawoko, you've been following. I hope you've been following what has been happening in the Africa Climate Summit that has been happening in Kenya, Nairobi, and what President Ruto said, that you see, when climate action, they say that climate action is not a global north issue or a global south issue. It is our challenge. So it requires a common collective responsibility to come up with global solutions. So as you unmute and give us the context as regards to climate change impact in Africa, in East Africa, and in Uganda, speak to the issue of representation that my sister brought about, but with emphasis on the climate change impact that we are facing as a continent, as East Africa, and as a country. Council?
Okay, thank you very much, Douglas. Yes, I've been following quite a bit, though not fully, the summit which is happening in Kenya. But I think, in my opinion, we have to first understand what climate is, of course. If you go back to the elementary definition that we were given in primary or the lowest level of education that we have in the country, they say this is the measure of a pattern of weather in a certain period, in a certain geographical space, okay? And when we're looking at the global impact of climate change, we're not only looking at Uganda or France or America, look at the whole world. Now, I want to come from the political, economic context, okay? Because these economies, talk of the US, France, these are economies that have gone through the Industrial Revolution. They have, exploited their resources, minerals. Even they came here, they have mined our resources, taken it that side to build on their infrastructure, which most of the Ugandans or other Africans are migrating to go and enjoy abroad. So because of the developments that they've done in their countries, of course, when they were constructing all that, all those things had a climate impact in the long future. Now in Africa here, we are still in a very young economy of sorts that is still moving towards industrialization at a level where you can also have the rate of development that we want. And for us to do that, we have to also exploit our resources, and that has an impact on climate as a whole, okay? So from my point of view, I think in as much as there is an agenda to sustainable climate evolution and all these carbon rules that are coming up and there, I think these rules should be developed in a context that allows us to also exploit our resources to develop ourselves. That said, when we come to the aspect of representation, okay, I think when you look at the state of our economy and the public officials who have been appointed in some of these offices to run the agenda of climate change, I think there's an issue of competence and also involving the society or the localities that are implementing some of these policies that government has put forward. Like personally, for example, I think there is this ban which has been put on polythene bags, commonly known as the buveras in Uganda. That I think that gradual move has been there since 2000. There have been lawsuits which have been filed and past declaratory judgments that buveras should be banned, no smoking in public places. But when it comes to implementation, nothing. Even in these government institutions that we have today, such polythene bags are still being used to move goods from point A to point B. So I think when it comes to representation, we need a system whereby people can speak and people also understand what they're talking about. Because if someone comes and says, oh, do not cut trees because this deforestation, because of deforestation, but remember, you're talking to literate people who don't even understand the impact of what, or the resultant consequence of what cutting trees is, okay? So how can the state or the government be involved in the whole system from the grassroots? And also, how can they provide them sustainable alternatives, okay? I see today we have, most people in urban areas use gas instead of charcoal, I think, which is a good thing. And the prices of charcoal are skyrocketing, which is putting many people off charcoal and sending them to using firewood in rural areas. And in urban areas like in Kampala, people are resorting to use of gas and cookers and things like that. I think those are the real practical issues that we look at, that we can look at in terms of the effects of climate change. Because if I use gas at my place, I think it saves a tree in another place, okay? When you go to these foreign countries like Europe or Germany, the UK, You have been following what has been happening in Ukraine, the blowing up of the gas pipeline, the gas pipeline in the sea. What has it done? Okay, how did those economies move from the use of wood fuel to gas, that all households have that? Okay, what system do you have in place to move our economy from that? Because I think that is the rudimentary source of climate change in our locality here. Most households use charcoal, and when everyone is using charcoal, it means trees have to suffer the effect. The trees have to be cut down. Okay, so Douglas, that is my opinion on that subject. Then I think the question asked was climate action is not a global North or global South issue. Okay, speak on to the issue of representation on climate change. Yeah, so I think we need we need a more flexible system in terms of involvement of the local masses, so that they can be able to understand what is climate, what is the impact of climate. Because if in Uganda, for us, we are having our policies that support maybe say taking back our climate to the previous let me say era when the climate was still good. How about the other countries like South Sudan, Congo? What are they doing? Because if they're doing the wrong thing, whatever we do here might not be able to equate, you know, to balance it all out. So this is a global issue, because what happens in the US affects what happens in Uganda. What happens in Uganda affects what's happening in South Africa. Yeah, so that's my take on that point. I don't know if I've answered the question, or you can give me more guidance on that. Thank you.
You have most certainly done justice to the question that I've asked, and thank you very much. You highlight very key and pertinent issues as regards to climate change impact, the issue of just transition, that how can we transition from high carbon emissions to low carbon emissions, because in Uganda, we have a number of people who use charcoal, or close to 80% of our population rely on charcoal or firewood for food. But we shall get to that conversation on a later date. But you highlighted, and which is very important for this conversation. I would now like to hear the opinions of Mr. George Kiprotich, who is from Kapchorwa. And you know, Kapchorwa is an area that is hilly, and I don't know if the place has also has faced devastating effects of climate change. Maybe you can give us what's happening in the area and how people are trying to cope up with the effects of climate change. Over to you, George.
Thank you, Douglas. I want to point out clearly that in Sebei, where the topography is so hilly, mountainous, the issues of climate change has really affected us badly, very, very badly. What I would say is that as a result, or some of the effect is that we know we've been having the increased or changing patterns of rainfall. And normally in our region, during the dry season, the soils become bare. And then suddenly you find that the heavy rainfall comes in. And then all the soil is swept down to the plains. So down in the plains, it has caused a lot of floods. It has caused siltations in many rivers down the other side. And rivers have even changed their course, changed their directions. And this has actually started to even conflict within communities, because now in this other side, you find that what shows the borderline between Karamoja and Sebei is a river. When that river changes its course and comes inside Sebei, the others will be claiming that this is their land, and now you cannot cross the river. You find that some of the things that has really disorganized and has caused issues that has affected that are not good in the communities. It as a result of heavy rainfall, it has caused the communities to even have that struggle, having that ethnic conflict. And then you find that the issues of landslides, I'm sure that you've been seeing in many news that have been reported, that landslides have occurred in Bulambuli is just a neighbor in Sebei. Even the other day it was in Sipi, that's Sebei. The rocks falling and that kind of thing. So as a result of this, you find that as the rain increases suddenly, there is always intensity. It causes a lot of, because of the rainfall intensity, it has caused more frequent and severe floods. And you find that this one has actually resulted to loss of life, people being displaced, and damage the infrastructure. Most of the roads, even that today you have crossed over, by the time you are coming back in the evening, the whole hill has moved and has blocked the road. I find that the infrastructure has been really disorganized, and even schools and that kind of thing. The issues of crops maybe failing to grow because of high maybe a long period of dryness, long spells of dry where there's no rain, that kind of thing. It has really caused a lot of crops not to grow, and also this one has led to food insecurity in the region. Sebei used to be the food basket of most parts of the country, but you realize that currently we do not produce food or cereal as expected, as used to be. Like those days, they used to know Sebei as the only region that produces wheat and barley and even maize. But currently, you don't realize that there is no wheat and the barley is not even there, and that kind of thing. So that food insecurity has really come up as a result of climate change. Because of the prolonged droughts, that has led to reduced agriculture yields and crop failures and that kind of thing. Then the issues of water scarcity. I'm sure that in Sebei, we used to have a lot of rivers. You would hardly move for 5 kilometers before a meeting or before encountering yourself with a huge flow of water. That's the river flowing down the stream. But currently, those valleys are there, but there is no water as a result of climate change. You find that as a result of high temperatures up the other side, because people have depleted the environment, we do not have the tree covers as it used to be. And therefore now you find that where it used to be source of water has dried up, and therefore the issues of water scarcity are becoming so intense. And this one has caused a huge problem in our region and even in other areas of the country. The issue of increased disease burdens has actually been realized, because you find that during the warmer temperatures and changing rainfall patterns, you find that these conditions creates a conducive and favorable conditions for spreading waterborne diseases like cholera, malaria, and water view. So you realize that in our region, for example, in the recent days, they have reported that there's cholera in Sebei. There is some place down this other side of, they call it on the low plains, that's Soy County. So that when there is a lot of rain this other side, water goes and floods the other side. And then you realize that these diseases comes in, and it has created a lot of huge burdens to the communities. The issue of people migrating, and as a result of being displaced by waters, landslides, and kind of thing. This one has been realized. People have left. You realize that the other day they used to tell you that there are people who left Bududa and they were taken to Kriandongo for resettlement. That kind of displacement has made the people to lose touch with their society, with their culture, and it has caused a lot of stress to many of the families and kind of thing. I already mentioned issues of infrastructure, where you find that schools getting destroyed, the houses, even the roads, and many other things that you find that government has used a lot of resources to build or to construct some of those things. And then finally, or maybe what I would point out is that these issues that I've just mentioned, I'm sure that it's not only in Sebei. in other countries, in other areas of our economy or of the country. You find that even yesterday, there was news. There was a lot of floods in Kampala. Someone actually told me that for us in Uganda, we need to look for another city. Kampala has refused because any slight rainfall, floods everywhere. And when there is floods, the destruction in the infrastructure is so enormous that government will always spend a lot of money in fixing those roads, in fixing some of those installations that have been put on the roadsides, and which is not a very good thing because those billboards fall because of the heavy rainfall, the heavy wind, and that kind of thing. So that is exactly what I really wanted to point out, and this applies in many other areas of our country. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. George. We have been joined at this time by Mr. Awadh Chemangi. He's the Natural Resource Officer in Kapchorwa. Mr. Awadh, Mr. Chemangi, as you join the conversation, tonight we're talking about climate justice, the role of citizens in protecting the environment. And just as you joined, you were listening to the submissions of Mr. George Kiprotich, who was highlighting the climate change impact in Sebei region. Of course, he talked about unpredicted rainfall patterns, siltation in the rivers, droughts, water scarcity, among others. So maybe as you unmute and introduce yourself further and delve into the conversation, maybe you could also give us a more deeper context and analysis, considering that you are the natural resource officer in the region, to tell us the impact that climate change has had in the region, but specifically on natural resources in the region. Mr. Chemangi, you're most welcome.
I'm Chemangi Awadh. I'm the District Natural Resources Officer, Kapchorwa. And I'm very grateful to be in this discussion and that I have joined in a bit late and I've heard very well about what George was talking. Secondly, I hope I'm being heard by people. If so, that is then good. I want to thank George very much for the presentation he has made. He has touched across the board of the areas that we look at as impacts of issues of climate change. And you know, climate change is now an abrupt situation in a place like Mount Elgon, which if you come towards the east, you expect lots of low temperatures, high rainfall, and a continued slow rainfall, not the one which sweeps across. He has put it so well that possibly some of the causes that has brought this was the current poor farming practices, the clear cut and the ban, and then use the land without protection, the issues of soil and water conservation, and then he gave us the real impacts. If I had to mention those few, he brought it so well, the issues of landslide, erosion, and the floods. This erosion, landslides, and the floods as a result of the failure of our communities to take up practices that are being mentioned by very many of you in this discussion. And so maybe possibly because of increased population and therefore fragmentation of land and the people therefore dig to all parts of the fragile ecosystems. These are riverbanks, steep hills, top hills, and no protection along those lines. So when you look at specifically, for example, Kapchorwa, and you talk of an issue like a landslide, once it happens, the ones we have seen in Kapchorwa takes you about over 500 meters long from the top of the start to the depth of the valley. In between the head and in between the beginning and the end in the valley, it will have swept off all the crops, bananas, coffee, sweet potato, the Irish potatoes, and the like, if it is. And then the buildings in within. And that is loss of property. That is the largest effect. one would see. And in that, he brought in the word of displacement and resettlement. These families who are nearby and have survived will need to move away from the place, because during the effect, people need to run off. This can happen in the night. It kills, it destroys property within, but then after, those who are within will then have to save their lives, because when rains are still falling, you'll expect another problem. Unfortunately, in Kapchorwa, there has been no proper resettlement. There has been no proper plan for our people to be displaced, not to be displaced, but to be moved away to safer areas for permanent settlement. Like you may have mentioned that in Bududa, it was done and people went to Kiriandongo. However, the effect is, of course, people have been moved away from their area. He mentioned people who have already been put off and they have been separated from their cultures, their neighbors, their graves. You know the culture of our people. But then that's another tough effect. If you think about your culture, your graves, your everything, then obviously the landslides will still continue to sweep you off. So well, that is one. We have the floods. The floods are not the ones like we see in Teso, Karamoja, Bukadea, and what have you, but our floods are more or less of quick run along the river banks and then hit crops and animals which could have been there and sweep them off. However, when they get in the lower regions of our areas, like the Mount Elgon regions that are on the lower side, like Buraburi, Bukadea, then the floods show off. And then because of the siltation, because when water runs, it runs through all the soils that has carried from the highland, goes and fills up the whole bottom of the river, of the wetland, and displaces the water. So the water then moves into the people's homes and the communities. And then the people then again run away from the places and they need resettlement. The same effects affect them across the board. When you look at now all this happening, erosion, thunderstorms, landslides, drought, are signs of climate change. Erratic rainfall falling at a time when you are not expecting. Communities are preparing to plant now, and then all of a sudden, it falls heavily and disappears for another 5 months, or 2 months, or 3 months. Crops dry up. There, poverty, because of crops. There will be a lot of hunger in the place. And also, in this way, communities need lots of support from external in terms of government support, NGO or partner support, in order to bring back the people, to bounce back to their situation where they would be. So my addition to George's explanation is that meanwhile we are having lots of this, preparation has been a bit low. Government and the people will react after the problem. We are only happy recently last week that we received the Office of the Prime Minister and the Uganda National Medical Authority. UNMA, Uganda National Meteorological Authority, who recently came and prepared us for the current rains which are coming. These rains are going to cause exactly what we are having. For example, in Kapchorwa, the most prone sites are in Gamoga sub-county, the whole Gamnarababa parishes. You come to Chema, the upper sides. You come to Kaptanya, the highland sides. You go to Manari and Asipi. Gabayua is even worse with hanging rocks. We do have a rock which is also cracked in West Division. With this heavy rains, it will take off. So now people know now exactly what will happen. But even if you tell them that get away from there, it becomes a problem. Now, what is the effect? The effect is the problem of mindset change. to issues of such problems. And the problem therefore comes that even if you persuade a person that now you get moved away to some other place, there will be a problem. It takes longer to think about it. Even if, of course, it is hard to go to a neighbor away, it is hard for them even to think that they can ever leave that place and they live elsewhere. Recently, again, Office of the Prime Minister, headed by Brigadier General called Sebagwao, came to the Mount Elgon region in Bugisu, in Bramburi, Kapchorwa, and the parts of, I think, actually it is Bramburi, Kapchorwa, and I think Banafa. They were told, we are going to support you. They told all of us, they invited the district leaders, then the sub-county, and then we were put into a meeting and discussed. And they were told that every person who is willing to move away shall be given 1 acre of land down in where they had built the other buildings in where people now call the New Bududa. And then you will be given 1 acre, and if you accept, you must relocate. Once you relocate, you will be given 17 million to Uganda Start Life, but you relinquish the land behind you. So there are lots of queries coming up. However, few have accepted in Kapsinda. We started with Kapsinda and Gamogo. A few of them have Gamogo. We took up about 200 people who have registered. In Kapsinda, they are about up to around less than 200 people who have been registered because they had mixed minds. Now I have 4 acres. They are going to give me 1 acre. How do I manage this with only 17 million? Those are questions which never get answers quickly, need a lot of time. But then the equation was, even if you had the 4 acres and the landslide comes, it will sweep the house and the crops and you and all die, which will be a better option. Leave the 4 acres and the tents, save life or die. So there are things which are difficult to put forward. So those would have been good solutions and things to be discussed in order to act. So I was looking at and preparation for a climate change effect. So this would be one of the best preparation for a climate change effect. So I am now looking like government is coming up well. They are looking at already, because they came telling us that we are having an El Nino running from beginning this September up to the end of November. So whoever is out there now should be knowing that we have an El Nino which is running, which it's actually it's a press release, well signed, that we have El Nino starting this month, September, up to the end of November. So we have to inform our communities to prepare. And these are part of the climate changes. However, we never know how it will come. It may come in parts, sometimes too high or too low. So whichever way we shall prepare, we have been given the write-ups. Now, I know that I've talked a lot, but I just wanted to say that when we talk about, when you describe the issue of climate justice, the role of citizens in protecting the environment, I think that is where I should have talked more. That
it's all right. Mr. Chemangi, I'll get back to you on that issue of climate justice. Allow me first to engage other panelists on grounds of education and awareness, which you highlighted that people do not know. So I'd like to get quickly the thoughts of Irene, then I'll get the thoughts of Mr. Council Lawoko, and then I'll get to George, and I'll come back to you. But let me start with Irene. Irene, you are an activist. And Mr. Chemangi highlighted the fact that people in Sebei region, which I would also like to submit and believe that almost everyone in this country have very limited information as regards to the effects of climate change. It is true that we hold we have sentimental value and sentimental attachments to the areas that we live in, regardless of the solutions that the government is trying to offer. People are still attached. So my question to you is, Irene, what role, how exactly can activists, you yourself as an activist, as civil society organizations, engage with the communities, educate them, make them aware about the effects of climate change, because that is something most of our communities do not know. Irene?
Yeah, thank you very much, Douglas. And thank you, Chimtai, for highlighting all the issues that you are basically facing in your community. And thanks to the government that have really coming up to intervene. Okay, going back to the question is, what are we doing as activists and as civil society organizations in Uganda? Basically, we cannot talk about climate justice minus climate finance. So what we are doing now, with or without resources, because we know that communities are facing these challenges, and at the same time, having experienced the climate catastrophes, they are also in high levels of poverty. They don't have money, right? So as activists and or as civil society organizations, with our little funds that we have, we go to the communities and we do a sensitization, we call out sensitization meetings and empowerment meetings, and in a way to bring it very clear to them. I think it is we should have a better option of using the placards, like drawing pictures, so that drawing pictures of the effects of climate change, so that even my grandmother that didn't go to school can really understand that when you cut down trees, you reduce on the levels of rain formation, and then this will lead to drought, right? And at the same time, this will lead to floods. I think bringing that idea at a locally led solution for a person like my grandmother or a person at the grassroots can really understand through pictures, other than using the hard words that we use at a global level, that when we talk about Paris Agreement, the people in local communities are not going to understand what a Paris Agreement is. But then when you really clarify it using the local ways that the communities are going to understand, I think it's one way that we create the public awareness on what is happening with the climate change impacts. Most of the panelists talked about deforestation. We all know that in Uganda, not only in Uganda, but in Africa, over 600 million people cannot access electricity. And then here in Uganda, we are talking about exploitation of oil. We talk of, when we tend to believe that when we exploit oil, it is going to boost our economy. But then Nigeria discovered its oil long time ago. And as of now, we hope that if oil is one of the natural resources that can really boost our economy as Africa, Nigeria would be among the richest country. But see what is happening, the conflicts, the displacement of people, the violation of land and environmental rights, So now talking about how we can work with communities, with citizens on climate change impacts, is that government also has a role to play. So of recent, our president released a press statement of how he is banning the cutting down of trees, the firewood, the deforestation in our country. But then if you say that you no longer want people to cut down trees, to use charcoal, what are the alternatives that you're putting in place for the communities to use? Because we cannot tell our communities, you cannot tell my family in the local community that you should stop cutting down trees for firewood or for charcoal. What are they going to use? This is the energy poverty that we are facing, that we are experiencing, not only in Uganda, but also as Africa at large. So we need solutions. We need solutions from our government leaders, from developed countries, because they are the ones that are really causing all these issues that Africans we are facing. They come exploit, while we Africans, we are suffering the consequences of exploitation of natural resources. And then when they come to intervene, they want to provide loans to us, which means that we are paying and paying and paying to them. They are getting richer and richer and richer through our resources. And the little funds or the little money we have, we are again paying back. So in this case, that's why I'm calling upon all like government leaders and the global north countries to stop exploiting our resources and to stop giving us loans in the name of supporting us. They should give us grants that we are going to use in climate adaptation and mitigation while creating awareness to the communities. And then if there are other possible means that they can really use to keep our environment and conserve our environment from climate change impacts, right? They can use minus exploiting or violating our rights as citizens, violating the rights of our environment. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Irene. You speak with so much passion. First and foremost, to the question that I asked as regards to education and awareness, that you see, it's very important to package information of climate change in a way that it is quite understandable and easily taken in and absorbed by either old or young, which is very important. But also ask a question of, if we go ahead and ban the use of charcoal, the president did that in northern Uganda, what other possible alternative do we then offer? I think that's a question that Mr. Chemangi will help answer, since he's a natural resource officer. But conclusively, you highlight the issue of climate finance, which is very important. But let me also quickly get the thoughts of my brother Lawoko, then I'll come to George and I'll get to Mr. Chemangi and try to wrap up the conversation. Councillor Lawoko, when you listen to the issue of education and awareness, very many people in our communities do not know that climate change is existent. People are rampantly cutting down trees without knowing the effects that it will have in later days and later years. Now, my question to you is in line of advocacy and policy. You're a lawyer, and you know, you definitely know the nitty-gritties of the law and what exactly the law must do to protect the environment. So my question to you is, how can professionals such as yourself effectively advocate for climate policies and changes in their communities? But also, lastly, what policy changes or actions at the government level would have the most impact on climate in Uganda? Councillor Wogem.
Thank you very much, Douglas, sir. Just to make sure I've understood your question well, is how can professionals effectively advocate for policy and also policy action of the government, right? I think this, when it comes to matters of policy, of course, we have a government ministry of environment, which I'm sure it does exist. And this ministry usually has its tentacles in almost all regions of the country and knows what is happening in terms of environment. So what I would think would happen is that this ministry, of course, will consult other client departments, other government departments and agencies to understand the business processes and how they can, because policies is crafted at that level, like these ideas are shared with these with engagement with different government agencies, and then their policy department will come up with the policy papers, which is tabled in Parliament to enact legislation. So one of the easiest ways in which such policies can take effect is through legislation, especially like I'm sure you have seen the taxes on taxes which are imposed on I think on carbon and other activities, which as a disincentive to the activities that that are happening. So from that level, it comes down to engagement with the ministry that is responsible for environmental matters, understanding the process flows in other government agencies and ministries, and then ensuring that a general blanket policy is issued in all other governmental entities. For example, I've told you in the tax, where I say that if maybe say, for example, the motor vehicles, okay? I'm sure you know that there is that tax on motor vehicles that have a high emission, I think cars which are older than 15 years. That is a good example to show you. So that is using economics to disincentivize people who are purchasing motor vehicles that have a high fuel emission. So that will help in climate. But this is just not a one action thing. It occurs through different and other diverse industries. So you have motor vehicle sectors, you may go into manufacturing and production and all that. I think that is how professionals, we use our skills and expertise to advance our thoughts on how the environment can be protected, and that is reduced into a policy paper, which is tabled and enacted into different legislation. I think that's another way in which we can do it. Come to legislation again. Remember, legislation is not only a function of the central government, also the local ordinances. All local governments have the power to legislate on some of these issues, like things like cutting trees. Like in my own village in Kitgum, I think there was a policy that certain type of trees shouldn't be cut. And they had put, I think, imprisonment for a period of time if they find you harming that particular tree, you know. So policy can be done at the central government level and even at the local government and regional level. That can be done. But the problem is that the people who also are supposed to be the policymakers may not understand how big a problem this is. And also, they're also the beneficiaries of using charcoal in their households. So when they're advancing such policies, they're also conflicted to some extent. So that makes our work very difficult in implementing, because the policies are there. But the question is, are they being enforced? Are people, following through by legislation or the enforcement agencies working? I think that's a debate for another day. I think my sister who spoke previously mentioned some interesting things, and I wanted to also maybe say add something little. I saw this issue of climate financing, okay? I think this is a very broad issue in my mind, because our problem as Africa has always been dependency. The issue of grants and loans, okay? It just exacerbates the problem and makes it even worse, you know? I think we need to find an internal mechanism without relying on foreign money or foreign grants and donor funding, because the more they give us this money, as these civil society organizations, some of them, they're just conduits for making money for individuals. You get it. So I think we need to find more sustainable ways internally instead of looking for foreign funding. I know this may not sound so good for some of my colleagues on this panel, but I'm just looking at it objectively because I've seen it happen over and over again. Like, let me just give an analogy. It's just like you have a house. Think of Uganda as a house, okay? In your house, if you're the owner of the household, you go, you work, you get revenue, and you take care of your house. But once you have people from outside financing the activities into your house, you're going to lose control of that house, and you're going to be forwarding the agendas of other people. That is my thought process. Thank you, Douglas.
Thank you very much, Council Jordan Lawoko. That has been a very interesting submission as regards to advocacy and policy. Mr. George Kiprotich, you are the Executive Director at Kapchorwa Civil Society Organization Alliance. And earlier on, I asked Ms. Irene on the role of civil society on education and awareness in local communities. I would like to pose the same question to you as regards to the role of citizens in protecting our environment. What are civil society organizations in Kapchorwa doing so as to help disseminate information as regards to climate change, climate adaptation, and climate mitigation? Mr. George Kiprotich?
Yes, Douglas, thank you very much for this opportunity. I want to basically point out that well, as civil society, you find that we are really well placed position in the communities. Most of the community members associate themselves with the civil society, meaning the civil society is the only bus that they can climb and move with. So they listen to us more critically, and you find that because why they listen to us mostly is that they know that we speak the same language. When we are holding the leaders to account on issues of climate mitigation, climate change, what are they doing, and other things. Like, for example, we look at the areas of production, look at the environment officer, what are they doing? We speak the same language, the communities, and that kind of thing. So in regard to what we are doing as the civil society is that, first of all, and that's very key, is that we've been able to respect the culture. I would say there is how the culture plays. There's a role that the cultural practice or the culture plays in fighting or in trying to conserve and mitigate these issues of climate change. We find that those days they used to be having sacred trees where no one would cut the tree unless the elders have agreed. Or if you go and you cut that tree without necessarily being given permission, there was a possibility that someone would even run mad, or some bad omen would happen to you, and that kind of thing. So you find that the involvement of the traditional or the cultural group, who are the custodians of the culture, they know what culture plays, is a very key in this thing. And we have made sure that as civil society, we have brought those people in to speak what the our grandfathers used to talk about these things, because they're the ones who used to take care of the trees so well. And even and looking at some of those traditional things that they do. So you look at the issues of engaging the communities, where local communities always bear the brunt of climate change effects. When you talk about these effects that is affecting us now, you cannot separate them with the community members, the local mwananchi. They are the ones who destroy these things. They are the ones who are supposed to move forward with whatever that we have given them, so that the fight against climate change is sustainable or is sustained. The citizens can only, we have always tried to engage them so that they're able to conserve, mitigate, and implement the climate resilient strategies. And these are some of the things, for example, the issue of sustainable farming practices, planting those crops that covers the soils, or maybe it compacts the soil together, so that there are issues of flood resistance in the communities. So we have tried to ensure that we engage the communities directly. The issue of education, informing themselves and others about climate science, for example, the impact, the solutions, has been always very vital. And we have invited these citizens to meetings, to workshops, to barazas, and we have tried to give them lectures or to try to give them the information on climate change and share the knowledge within the community members. So you find that our people lack the information. You have to explain that if you cut the tree, what are the adverse effects? If the tree cover is fully there. Yeah, and that kind of thing. So there was someone speaking. So the issue of trying to promote issues of sustainable agriculture, for example, where we have tried to encourage the communities on suitable farming practices. And these are issues like agroforestry, using the organic farming that always reduce emissions for to the environment, for example, that kind of thing. So we have tried to actually make sure that we do lobby and advocacy in ensuring that even those policymakers, we bring them down and we hold them to account. Like I mentioned, that in every district, for example, we have forestry officer, we have environment officer, we have the production. I think I don't know whether those lie in the production department. All these are the very key sectors that when they are held to account what they are doing, you find that issues that we're talking about would go down, and therefore we'll be able to have climate smart agriculture, and also people will be able to plant more trees. Like, for example, because we're in the border, in Kenya, there is a policy that you cut one tree, you plant two. So if someone is having, and it's almost like law, it's like actually there is a policy like that, so that if I've planted, even if I have trees within my land, there is no day I will cut those trees without getting a permission from LSC1 or someone in authority. So that those people, before they allow you to cut that one tree, you must bring two seedlings and show them that I'm going to plant this one here. And they will come to check, environment officer, and serve it jealously. You have to protect it when you're jealous. It's a policy that has worked. And that's why in Kenya, issues of destroying and consuming environment is is at a different level. You see the other professor, Wangari Maathai, had the campaign of greening the world. She was given a Nobel Peace Prize because she promoted the planting of trees in Kenyan economy and that kind of thing. So I would say that we've been able to hold the leaders to account, and I think the direction that we are going looks to be steady and in a progressive manner. It used not to be before, because we have made noise in the radios, gone to the communities as civil society, and make sure that we move with the masses. And in every sub-county, KACSOA is having 5 change agents, the champions, people who are championing these things, so that wherever they sit, they pose issues of climate change and they discuss at that level and that kind of thing. So I see that if we move it that direction with support, of course, from other different stakeholders, we shall be able to bring a change that is realized. And that's where, when you look at the summit in Nairobi, what they spoke about, you find that they needed to have solutions, key solutions. And these are some of the things they talked about, what I've just mentioned right now. Thank you so much, and I give back the ball to you, Douglas.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. George, and well done to the work that you're doing to see that we disseminate information as regards to climate change. That is very good and very interesting work that you're doing there. We have reached almost the top of the hour of our conversation. So I'll quickly get to Mr. Chemangi. He wanted to comment on something relating to climate justice. Go ahead and make your submissions as regards to climate justice, as well as give us your parting shots, your final statements, and then I get the final statements from the other panelists as well. Thank you. Mr. Chemangi.
Yeah, thank you, Douglas. I will just be very brief. Of course, when I heard the word when I heard the word climate justice, I was excited. And now when you brought in the lawyer, I think he put it so clear that I was able to catch up with what he was saying. And then, of course, the role of citizens in protecting the environment. I wouldn't like to go back to it again, but of course, like every person who was discussing was giving alternatives, which you told me that what solutions or what alternatives do you think can be done in order to reduce, therefore, since they are saying that they are banning charcoal use across the board, especially in the north, which is also affecting us. Even in Queen and the Kapchorwa, we have also started doing that. But we're asked that what alternative do we give for that? Sometimes the people who are cutting are not the owners of the land. More or less, these are more of business persons who want to sell it off. And they buy them from the community and then do a lot of tree cutting and then do the business. However, because there is no source of income, that becomes a very soft spot and a very easy way to go in for a business. So we're saying that one of the most immediate alternatives was that they will be reduced. There will be change of business. These people who deal with the charcoal as a business can change business. They can go to the current Mioga, get the money, go to PTM and whatever, get the money and change their business to either vegetable growing, which is now booming, certain types of farming, which are now booming. And maybe it will reduce the people who are doing a lot of tree cutting, because really you can't stop it completely, because the community itself, some of them do not have any other alternative other than fuel wood. And so those ones can then reduce the amounts of tree cutting. That would be a most local method that can be used. And then the community itself can then change that business as well. They can go only for fuel wood in order to use it as at household level. Now, what then will the town people do? Because those are the largest consumers of charcoal, in hotels, in homes, in communities. I was saying that, okay, we have gas from petroleum in all gas stations across the country. But the problem is the price. It is too high. So I think that can be used in town, but then there will be a subsidy. Whichever method, I don't know, but will be a better alternative. And then this, therefore, takes us even to use of electricity. Electricity has gone, there is rural electrification that has gone to most of the rural villages, even if it doesn't touch a lot of them. Because a lot of people who use fuel wood are those who are not in the villages. A lot of them are in the towns. So actually, the worst part is the tariffs of electricity today as well is very high. That even the local ones, the local people who are able to use them, who have even simple grinding mills to use in the community, are unable to use because the costs are so high. So we're saying that meanwhile that one is running, we have been looking at support from NGO, people doing biogases as an alternative for fuel wood and the reduction of emissions to the air. So there will be continuous sustainable tree cutting. Other than cutting everything, they will be planting, as Joyce said, and then at the same time you are cutting. And as you cut, you have already a planned move of tree cutting. Because people who have planted gravilia, for example, around their compounds, and then you do pollarding of only 5 this season, it can be enough in a whole community and in that household to use during the wet season. As the dry season comes in, they pollard another 5. If you have around 20 trees around your compound or nearer of that kind, like gravilia, then you have enough fuel wood at community level. So we're saying that there should be continued sensitization to inform these people and the change of business other than charcoal burning, and then reduce the tariffs if government can do that with the gas in conjunction in order to increase the use of other alternatives other than fuel wood. However, talking about systematic planting and then agroforestry, which has already been mentioned has been one of the common activities that is being carried out in the communities wherever we are. And every support from every person, at the end, it is tree planting. Meanwhile, we are talking about climate change. You are talking about processes.
Mr. Chemangi, as you conclude.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
As you conclude, sir, your submissions are very beautiful and powerful, but we have reached the top of the hour and we have to conclude. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Those have been very good submissions you have added to tonight's conversation. And to the viewers out there who are watching, definitely, we hope we can implement what we have learned from you, and we're very happy as Civic Space TV and Center for Constitutional Governance for having had the opportunity to interact with you. Let me hear the thoughts of Mr. George Kiprotich, your parting shots.
No, these issues of the computers have always been challenging me a little bit here. But what I'm saying is that, in a nutshell, is that there is need to have grassroots mobilization and support. So going down to the people who destroy much of this environment are the people who do not have information. We need to go down there and mobilize them in big numbers, engaging the local communities, empower them, organize meetings, workshops, and educating them. There is an issue that we need to have collaborative and networking for change, so that when a stakeholder or an organization is in Kampala and has got resources that they want to disseminate it in the communities, they do not need to come and go to the community directly, but they can pass through an influential person in that district or that community, or even a civil society or community groups. And then those ones now can move directly as they share their resources, knowledge, and best practices. The issue of policy advocacy is also a very key. You find that we have policies that have been put on the shelves. People need to use the thing. They need to get to understand that when issues of climate change is affecting us, these are the impacts and these are the repercussions if you happen not to conserve the environment. And then, of course, we need to engage the change agents or the government, the people who are in power, who are in authorities. They seem to be concentrating on other things. They want to see allowances, go for meetings, and then they see how much has entered into the pocket. And they do not need, sometimes they forget that they need to be spot on and in time. The other day, I saw a region where there was a tree planting campaign, but they were planting trees that are very tall, that when you put down here, the trees are already matured and they all died. You cannot see a trace of those things. But government has put a lot of money there, and they're saying they're doing the right thing. And then they take photos where the thing is still green, but when the thing, after a week, 2-3 days, the thing is dead. So the issue is we need to engage them and understand that if you have a program that is good for the people, then in a timely manner, let the trees be supplied to the people so that people can plant at the rightful time, the rightful season, during the rain season, and then things will really work out very well. And then, of course, the issue of engaging the youth, I've just realized, we all know that what we are doing currently, if we do things wrongly, the impact will be paid by the people who are native born, or the youth, the young people. We need to engage the young people so that these people can understand and begin conserving the environment now, not even tomorrow. And then engaging the corporates, the banks, the corporate world. They seem to be organized a little bit, that when they come in, they can inject the resources quickly and then cause public pressure to influence policy decision-making process. And then the issue of legal actions, of course, we need to have some laws So that if things happen badly, someone needs to be put to book. Otherwise, let me end there because of time.
Thank you very much. Those are very good recommendations. I'm actually I'm very intrigued that you highlighted the aspect of youth participation and youth involvement. I think it's very important. I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues, and he told me, you see, everything we do now, we should hyphenate it with climate action or climate change. You see how the fights of our fathers, of our grandfathers, was of freedom, of independence. The fight of my generation with the young people is one that is it's for the environment, climate action. So with everything that we do, we need to see that there is sustainable development and there is protection of the environment. Powerful. Thank you. Mr. Jordan, let me get to you, then I'll conclude with the lady. Quickly, let's get your parting shots and we can wind up the conversation. Thank you very much, Mr. George and Mr. Chemangi. Jordan, the floor is yours.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Douglas. My parting shots: environment, society, it's all very important, because the society we exist in, if it has a bad environment, our welfare and well-being will be at the wrong place, we will suffer. So I think the whole issue of climate justice and all that, we need to develop local, sustainable ways in which we can develop people's understanding of the importance of their environment, because if you destroy it, it will not exist tomorrow. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. We need to develop sustainable ways of living for us to have a sustainable future. Powerful, thank you. The only lady on the panel, Miss Irene Twongire, kindly unmute, turn on your video, and wish or say your concluding remarks as we end the show. Miss Irene, the floor is yours.
Yes, please. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Douglas. Thank you, all the participants on the call. In a nutshell, I think we need government need to work hand in hand with the civil society organizations, because we believe that civil society organizations work in solidarity and collaboration with the communities that are really being affected by climate change catastrophes. So if we really need our country to be free from climate change catastrophes or to increase on the climate adaptation, there is urgent need for the government, civil society organizations to work together in solidarity and in collaboration with one another to help our communities, our families that are really being affected by climate change catastrophes are through creating public awareness and through investing in the locally led solutions. Then we talk about what are other alternatives. I think there are many alternatives that we can really talk about in this call and for other people to be aware. The alternative of using biogas, some colleague of mine talked about it, and then there is other alternative of using briquettes. These are cheap and locally led solution that can really be replaced instead of firewood. We can use briquettes for cooking, for money, instead of cutting down trees to do firewood, to do charcoal, which has really impacted us as communities and as grassroots, and especially as women. When we talk about energy poverty, women, we are on the forefront of suffering the burden of energy poverty. So, and then there's another, we should invest it in green economic alternatives. We talk of renewable energy, other than we talk of standalone solar panels for the vulnerable communities that cannot really access to buy even 1 unit of yaka, because electricity is expensive, that's for sure. We cannot manage it. Communities cannot really manage it. But if government, together with these developed countries that are coming to to exploit our resources, provide the standalone computers for the communities, that standalone solar panels for the communities, to give them the freedom of light. I mean, to give them standalone solar panels to access cheap and accessible solar for their communities, both for charging their phones and at the same time for providing light for their providing light at home. Then another parting shot is engaging the youth, like how my colleague talked about. Youth have a great voice, and to change the narrative as soon as they can, because they are so powerful. Their voices are so powerful. We are the future of the next generation. So involving the youth in all this will really help us in promoting climate justice and working together to see that the next generation is sustainable. And then living alone, not forgetting involving in gender. When I talk about gender, I mean women representative, because we are the most affected by climate change impacts, but we are less represented when we talk about these national conferences. You find there are few women from grassroots to speak on their behalf or on the behalf of the communities. Yeah, with that, thank you for giving us the opportunity and to speak on how climate change is really affecting Africa at large. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That has been a powerful and wonderful submission. And it's very important and it's very key on the aspect of youth participation, on the aspect of empowerment, on the aspect of gender equity and equality, on climate justice and the conversations on climate change. It's been a wonderful discussion. It's been very interesting having you, Mr. Awadh, Chemangi, Ms. Twongire, Ireen, Mr. George Kiprotich, and Mr. Jordan Lawoko, for taking off your time to join us in tonight's conversation of climate justice, the role of citizens in protecting the environment. It's been very wonderful, and we as Center for Constitutional Governance were very happy that you honored our invitation and joined us for this discussion. Civic Space TV is very happy to having hosted all of you on the show. Thank you very much. And from me to you, I've been your host today. Douglas Onen is my name. I pursue law at Uganda Christian University. Personally, I'm a climate change activist. I am a program associate with an organization called Greenery Environmental Research Center Uganda. Otherwise, it's been wonderful. It's been great. See you again, same time, same place. Bye-bye. Have a blessed week. See ya.